for me personally, the big thing I noticed in myself was everything came together in this life change that I was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I noticed I knew what I was talking about. And that was really like confidence building, where particularly women get this imposter syndrome where you go, do I actually know what I'm talking about? But getting the feedback from these professors, like, oh, yeah, that's an appropriate solution.
Mm-hmm.
That's a realistic solution. It's not just an academic solution that you can't apply in real life.
Yes.
And it was everything, my life experience, business experience, finance experience, and then the sustainability learnings I was gaining at the university was all coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And I realised I could bring this package of ideas together for a realistic solution that could actually create change.
Hi, I'm Sarah Bartholomew's from YouLegal. The Accountants on Purpose podcast showcases inspiring accountants who are leaders in their field.
And then it just came to me like a bolt of blue.
What makes them tick?
Love it.
How did they get to where they are?
I want to inspire.
And what do they do now for their teams, their clients, and the world? Are you looking to make a difference in your accounting career? Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand have designed a new program to offer greater learning flexibility, allowing candidates to balance work and study efficiently. The new CA program offers authentic assessments based on real-world scenarios that integrate technical and professional capabilities and impactful learning through a blend of digital and face-to-face options. Learn more, search New CA Program today. My guest today is Frances Carter, an experienced sustainability, finance and sustainable development professional with over 15 years experience across Asia, Africa, Australia, Europe and the United States. She's currently a consultant at Conservation Capital and ERIAS, and she specialises in nature-based solutions and conservation enterprises, public and private sector engagement, conservation finances, ESG, corporate sustainability and reporting, and carbon management, and GHG accounting. Not only is her experience multi-geographical, it is multi-industry. Frances has experience ranging from international development and financial inclusion, working with private sector, aid agency and donor partners, financial services, Australian and US funds management and auditing. It comes as no surprise that we need more people like Frances in today's world.
I'm Frances Carter from ERIAS Group. Join us on the Accountants on Purpose podcast.
What's your favourite animal?
So this is where there are multiple answers.
Okay.
Because in my daily life, of course, dogs.
Uh-huh.
You've met Henry,
I have.
the Groodle, the big fluffy boof. He's described as, what did someone say? He's like the dog from I've forgotten the movie with the flying dog that's in our era. The Never-Ending Story.
Oh.
That's it. They
Is
said
that
it's
a
like
dog?
that.
I think that's a luck dragon.
Oh, is he? Oh,
Yeah.
it looks like that. He looks like a luck dragon.
Okay, cool.
But I must say, if you're talking about the world of animals and my experience with animals, I'd say it's apex predators,
Oh.
particularly lions and wolves.
Mm.
Because when I moved to Botswana, I always remember the first time I saw a lion in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
you just
that would be
get
hard
this
to forget.
Yeah, you get this humbling feeling where you go, yeah, you're the king out here.
Yeah.
On an even playing field, I'm
Not going to mess with you.
not going to mess with you.
I
And
haven't.
they're much bigger than you think they're going to be. They're huge. And same with wolves. They're both pack animals. And they're just the cooperation in the hunting. And I've seen a couple of lion hunts and they're just amazing to watch.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm just in awe of those apex predators. Yeah.
I recently did the Lion 360 experience at Monarto.
Oh yes,
And
I've heard it's really good.
It was amazing, but I had got eye contact with one of the lionesses, and that was
chilling.
very emotional.
Yeah.
Like it was that, oh, you're the boss here kind of moment
Yeah.
you just mentioned.
Yeah. And their eyes, that yellow eye with the small pupil, and they look directly at you. And you go, okay, yeah, you're looking at me as if I'm food and I'm not supposed to be here.
But I did have my children with me, and I know that they would be the food first.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
whoever can outrun who is...
That's a good point. Might be me.
Yeah.
What is the favourite country that you've worked in or travelled to?
Again, not
Can't
a single
choose
answer,
between.
because Australia, as the song goes, I will always call Australia home, and the Australian outback is just such a great place. I always feel at peace out there and connected to nature. And I must say, after living in so many countries and cultures, the Australian vernacular and culture is so funny and unique, and I really think we should keep it with that. I see that there's the Americanism of language coming in, but I've been around friends where I've said a sentence and they've looked at me and said, "Did you just speak English? We have no idea what you just said." And I've realised it's the Australian slang coming through, but also using different words like boot instead of trunk, but slang is in chockers. And those sort of things. It's really funny. But from overseas, again, there are two that stand out. Botswana, from a natural point of view, just amazing nature, the animals, but the people are so welcoming and friendly. And I have some lifelong friends I made from my time in Botswana. And then Spain, because I have a connection with Spain, being born in Spain, and the Spanish language is just a beautiful language. But the history and the culture, the architecture, the food of Spain is amazing. And they know how to live life. They really know how to live life. And that goes down to how people work. Their work hours in Spain are different.
Afternoon naps.
To take advantage of the sun and
avoid the heat.
Yeah, and have meals with family. Yeah. Yeah. So, those two countries outside Australia.
What's been your most life-changing event that you've experienced so far?
There have been many that, looking back, are sliding door moments that I acknowledge have been sliding door moments. Like changing high schools definitely was a good decision for me. Going on a gap here and getting that independence to live overseas was a huge milestone. But I would say overall was my time at Columbia University in New York. Because that time, for many reasons, living in New York is, you're in one of the great cities of the world and it's just exciting. But to be at a university like Columbia is just at another level of access to professors that are world-class. And they're not just professors, they're working in industry, they're heads of large investment funds or consultancies or whatever field they're in. And the colleagues, the peers you come in contact with are so diverse. But for me personally, the big thing I noticed in myself was everything came together in this life change that I was going on. So, and I noticed I knew what I was talking about. And that was really like confidence building, where particularly women get this imposter syndrome. We go, do I actually know what I'm talking about? But getting the feedback from these professors, like, oh, yeah, that's an appropriate solution. That's a realistic solution. It's not just an academic solution that you can't apply in real life.
Yes.
And it was everything, my life experience, business experience, finance experience, and then the sustainability learnings I was gaining at the university was all coming together. And I realised I could bring this package of ideas together for a realistic solution that could actually create change.
And from all of your experiences kind of funneled into this, and you were like, this is where I'm meant to be right now.
Yeah. And I knew it was, by that time, that was a 6-year journey from leaving the pure accounting industry to this sustainability profession, that it all came together. And I was using my accounting and I was using my MBA and the business experience and
all
strategy.
your international experience
and all
as
my
well.
international experience of understanding developing countries and emerging markets and what's realistic in those situations. And then the new knowledge I was getting from natural sciences, such as ecology of forests and water management of systems and climate science. I was bringing that all together in these. Well, the capstone project is the equivalent of your theses. In America, they call it the capstone. So big projects like that were coming together. Yeah. So that was, I'd say, for me, personally and professionally, was the best experience I've had so
Understandably.
far, and life-changing. Yeah.
What is one thing you think everyone can do to make the world a better place?
Ooh. Tough question. But I think on the individual level, people can be responsible consumers. Consumerism is really driving a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the natural world and in society. So I think on an individual level, at a household level, people take responsibility for what they're purchasing and understand that that dollar that you're spending is an affirmation for that product. And you're saying that product's fine. How it's made is fine. Just have that awareness. And I know it can be overwhelming. I'm not saying like go through every single thing you're buying, but be aware and maybe think about what's important to you. I had a friend recently say, I get so stressed shopping because I want to be responsible, but I don't know what I should and shouldn't buy. And my answer was, pick what's important to you. Like top 2 or 3 things. Is it emissions? Is it animal welfare?
Is it
slavery?
being made in Australia?
Is it made in Australia? Is it deforestation and biodiversity?
Otherwise, it can be overwhelming.
It's so overwhelming.
Or even like I recently read Richard Flanagan's book Toxic about the salmon industry in Tasmania.
Yeah.
And we eat salmon in our family.
Yeah.
And my husband said, oh, well, we can stop. And I said, well, I feel like then I have to understand the whole ecosystem of whatever it is that we replace it with and work out if it's better or worse. And I don't have 15 years or however long Richard spent writing that book to try and figure that out with everything that there is available to eat. So it is a real conundrum.
It is. And that's where nothing is going to be perfect. There's always going to be a trade-off somewhere. And for me personally, what I focus on, what's important to me is deforestation and biodiversity and packaging. So I personally buy things that I know are appropriate for where they're grown and they haven't taken a huge amount of water and land clearance and they're grown in a geography where they're supposed to be grown.
Like rice shouldn't be grown in Australia?
There's an argument for that, yes. Why is a crop like rice grown in the driest inhabited continent on Earth that we have, and climate change is happening where you're going to have extended droughts. So that is one contentious issue that's happening. The debates are happening in Australia about rice and cotton and
so I could pick water.
You could pick water, yeah.
Because I stopped having almond milk.
Yes, and that's I was going to use that as an example of a key issue where people think they've switched to something that's better and it's caused a big environmental disaster. So the vegan and vegetarian movement going, we're not because of animal, very like clear, reputable animal welfare issues, but also pollution issues with the dairy industry, have moved to plant-based foods. But almonds are incredibly water thirsty and the major producers are Australia and in California and they're dry geographies.
Both of them. And
particularly in California, almonds have caused a major environmental issue with nearly draining the aquifer and the Chinook salmon species nearly going extinct. And the big issue was raised in 2014. So it's one of those things where people do a bit of research. If you're that interested in changing your diet, then take the time to do the research in what you're going into, because I guarantee you there's going to be another impact. And it depends whether that impact is it sits well with you. Same with avocados. It's now called the green gold, and they're having current issues with mass deforestation in Colombia for avocados because they can't grow in shaded areas, so you have to clear the forest. While coffee can, and there was some coffee growth. So there's always going to be a trade-off, and you choose what is important to you. And packaging. So, for example, in Woolworths, I would like to buy organic, but a lot of their organic produce is packaged in plastic.
It is.
So I personally, for me, would prefer to buy the non-organic
and
not
have
plastic.
the additional plastic.
But some people would say, no, organic's more important to me, and that's fine. That's the trade-off that happens. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, it's such a huge
So it's just
topic.
So I'd just say just take responsibility for what you're buying.
What is ESG and why is it important?
So ESG is the financial services term for sustainability or sustainable development. They're all interchangeable.
Does it stand for something?
It stands for environmental, social and governance.
Okay.
So what financial services has done is they've taken the realm of sustainability, which is, as we've just discussed, is so big. It covers environmental, social, economic, and there's a fourth pillar that I use is political as well, if something's politically sustainable.
Okay.
Which is becoming more and more apparent with geopolitical tensions, particularly in our region. So for financial services, for them to make investments and analyse businesses, they have to measure something. Now, from the financial side, that's very easy because you've got profit and earnings per share and all these fancy ratios and statistics they use. But for non-financial issues like modern slavery and deforestation and emissions.
Well, even cultural issues we were talking
and
about.
Diversity and Indigenous and all that, Indigenous issues and all that sort of thing, it's hard to measure it. So what financial services has done is they've gone and say, okay, we're going to divide this whole range of factors that businesses outwardly impact but also inwardly impact the business. We're going to divide it up into 3 areas: environmental, social and governance. Because governance is obviously, that covers the financial fiduciary area, but it also covers corruption and probably the political sustainability as well. So that's why that's called ESG. But it's basically sustainability, and it's how the financial services industry rates the performance of companies on their non-financial characteristics and impacts, and whether they're doing a good job or a bad job in comparison to their industry peers.
Okay.
Yeah. And societal expectations. And it's a constantly shifting area.
It would be.
Because society is changing its expectations.
And it's not something you can just look at like a balance sheet.
No.
And judge easily against everyone else.
Yeah. And basically I put it down to Warren Buffett saying is, if you do not want what you're doing on the front page of the newspaper, then you probably have a sustainability issue. And that's your measurement. It's like, would I be happy to tell my mother that I'm doing this? And someone else told me that, I've forgotten who said that. It's like, if you wouldn't be happy to go and tell your family that you're involved in these sort of things, then you probably have an issue.
Yeah.
And there's another way to look at it is companies have a whole lot of mission statements and they'll say, we will do this, we will not do this. To measure the ESG, one of the first things is, are you actually following the mission statement? Are you saying we're going to have zero harm?
Service? Yeah.
Are we actually, if, for example, we're going to invest in X company, and X company has been involved in modern slavery or has factories in a high slavery risk geography, and we say we're not going to engage in modern slavery, you might want to think, well, is this investment a sound investment for us? Is it appropriate? And what are our stakeholders' expectations of us? So that's sort of on a very high level how ESG is viewed and how it operates. And then you get down to the technical side of actually measuring it and performance managing it and setting strategies and risk assessments and physically what happens on the ground.
How did you switch from accounting to sustainability?
So it's been, now let me work this out now, it's been now a 6-7 year journey. So I was working, climbing the corporate ladder in Sydney at the banks.
Mm-hmm. Global banks.
Yeah. And I realised, at my sort of 7th in a row, 2 o'clock in the morning stint, that I didn't want to do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I would walk out the door and look at all these people on the street and go, what I do doesn't impact them at all.
Mm.
Like if I stop tomorrow, it doesn't impact anyone's life.
Mm.
It doesn't make any difference. And yeah, sure, some regulatory reports wouldn't be submitted and the company might get in a bit of trouble. But in the grand scheme of things, I felt like in the end my job didn't really matter. And it sounds a bit cliche, but I was really looking for this purpose. And felt like I want to make a footprint, a positive footprint. And that really comes from my parents. Mm-hmm. My mum, particularly as an environmental scientist, a conservationist who's spent her life fighting for the environment. And I've got this personal passion for conservation. So I walked away and I decided...
Did you just resign with nothing to go to?
No, I did
or
make...
you
I did
started
make,
planning?
Yeah, I made the mistake of I doubted how I was feeling and I went and got another job as a finance manager. And it was very clear on my first day that I just didn't want to be there. Mm. So, yeah, that didn't last very long.
But sometimes you do have to try. And if you knew quickly, then that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to know quickly. I think I didn't want to be stuck where you go.
Get into the...
And also from the CV point of view, it's like you want a timeline where you actually don't want to put that mistake on your CV that you can quickly switch it over. So it was like, I don't really want to stay around here. And it was really because I just didn't want to be in Sydney anymore. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to just do pure accounting anymore. I'd done it for over a decade and I'd done it well. I was good at my job, but I just didn't enjoy it anymore. So I left that job and I went home. I literally went home and straight away went on the DFAT website to look at AVID program volunteer positions. And AVID stands for Australian Volunteers for International Development, and it's part of the Australian Aid program. Mm-hmm. So, and they're professional positions, even though it's classified as volunteer. Mm-hmm. It is a professional position where you have to apply like a job and have interviews and everything. Because I did 2 positions, one was in East Timor and one was in Botswana. Mm-hmm. And I was advising NGOs on their financial systems and their internal controls. Everything I do isn't, what I was doing at the banks anyway.
That felt like you were having a greater impact.
I was having and I was also training the staff. And most of the staff don't have degrees or anything in this area. They don't have any understanding. And I really realised then that I really enjoy training people and I enjoy the developing emerging markets. Mm-hmm. Because you have a situation where you have far less resources than you would in Australia, you have to be very innovative in these markets. You have to think on your feet. You have to gain their trust because you're talking about, particularly in microfinance, which was the area I was working in Botswana, you're asking people that earn a couple of dollars a day in some instances to manage their money a certain way. And when you only have that much money, you have to make it work. There's no materiality level there. There's no flexibility. And for them to listen to you, they have to trust you. So it's a lot of soft skills as well.
And you've got cultural differences to work through and language issues.
Yeah. So, and when you're putting training materials together, you have to think creatively because you can't just write an English language. Some people don't speak English and some people can't read. So you have to think of different ways of doing it. So I really enjoyed that. So that was a step, still using finance, because I realised I do find financial services very fascinating, and I realised wherever money goes will control what happens and where investments go. And this was, while I was in East Timor and Botswana, I was really observing what was happening around me and talking to my friends who were working in these areas of international development, of, you know, there were so many areas you could go into, and I was still confused exactly where I would place myself. I was interested in conservation, I was interested in gender equality, and I was an accountant. But I wanted to work in international development. But at the same time, I was also interested in businesses and businesses doing the right thing, because Anglo-American have big diamond mines up in Botswana and that sort of thing. So I was still trying to work out exactly where I fit in this big world.
Yeah.
So, yeah, then I went and studied my MBA in Spain, and that broadened me out of accounting and more into business.
Yes.
And then I went to New York and did the Masters of Science in Sustainability Management at Columbia. And then you find me here.
Yay. Yay for us. What are the lessons you've learned that have stayed with you throughout your career so far?
From a personal point of view, is that, and it goes back to where I say people need to trust you, is that integrity is so important that once you lose it, it's close to impossible to get it back. Being a decent human being, just be a good person. People do not respond if you're arrogant, rude, selfish. It just that translates across all cultures. So yeah, it's just being a good person and maintaining a sense of humour is one of the big lessons, because you can't, particularly in this space, it can be quite frustrating and bordering on depressing sometimes when you see things happen which are heartbreaking in the natural world, but also in poverty, and companies not doing the right thing, and politicians not doing the right thing, and communities suffering because of that, and ecosystems suffering because of that. So you have to have a perspective, maintain that hope, but also keep a sense of humour around it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it can get overwhelming.
That sort of comes to my next question, which is there's a lot of scary and quite depressing information coming out about climate change and the environment. How do you manage to stay positive? Is it just that keeping the sense of humour, or...?
No, you also need external influences.
Like comedy shows?
Yeah, comedy shows help. But inspirational people that have managed to maintain being centred and hopeful work through it.
Adversity.
And people who have seen a lot worse than I've seen. So, for example, Dr. Jane Goodall, the New Yorker Festival was on recently virtually, and she was a speaker. And I listened to her presentation, and she must have seen some atrocious things that have happened and heartbreaking things, but also some amazing things as well. And she has maintained, she's so graceful, and she's not cynical, but she's honest. She will say humans have created this disaster of biodiversity loss, COVID, and climate change. This is all on us, and don't for a second think it's not and be in denial about that. But because we've done that, we've also got the tools to fix it. And we have them now. We don't have to wait. As much as politicians try and tell us, oh, we have to wait and take our time, we've got the intellectual capability, the technology, the skills, everything to fix the problems that we have now. And there is hope there. So she really communicated that sense of hope. And it's listening to people like that, that have been through tough times, even from a humanity point of view, like you hear Nelson Mandela. How could someone who's gone through so much trauma and could easily hate the other side of the apartheid regime didn't?
No.
And he came out with peace and a message of unity. It's like, well, if they can do that, it's like you can't really get too bogged down and angry about this. You do. You have your moments screaming at the TV.
Everybody does.
You know, when the news comes on. Yeah. It's you take it from the best in the business of how they carry themselves and the message they have. Yeah.
What is your purpose?
Oh, my purpose, I would say, is basically it's to redefine how business operates and to make sure business are stewards of the social and natural capital that they have control or influence over. So where I work is in the space where governments have either failed, the policy is failing, or it's non-existent for whatever reasons that happens. And businesses are operating in this space and they have a choice whether they do X or Y. And just because you can do something doesn't mean you do it.
You should, yeah.
And a good example of that is like it's always talked about is Rio with the cave blast. It was legal, but they should never have done that. It was not the right thing to do. And that's why sustainability it's a standard above compliance. Compliance is not enough anymore. Compliance is your bare minimum. Sustainability is a standard you have to reach for. And just because you can do something doesn't mean you do it. Otherwise, you will sit in a situation that Rio's in. And in the end, that will hit you financially. That if you're making decisions purely from a financial basis and not a ESG sustainability basis of looking at the whole picture, in the end, it will cost you. It's going to cost you anyway. In legal fees, in loss of revenue, increased costs, loss of staff that don't want to work for you.
Reputation.
Your reputation is going to be hit.
I just think about Nike and how long ago.
Nike is a good example, and they learnt their lesson, is that the sweatshops.
People still think about it though.
But they're legal in China. That's the thing. People say, well, we're abiding by the laws of the country and we operate. That doesn't mean anything.
No, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't mean anything. You have the Bangladeshi factory fire.
Or collapse.
Yeah, and the collapse of the building. So you need to think, what do my stakeholders expect from me? What do I expect from me? And again, back to that thing, if this was on the front page of the news, do I back it up? And does it actually meet our mission statement? So that's where I sit. That's my purpose, is to make sure businesses act as stewards and they're aware of their responsibility. And not only aware of it, they're happy to have that responsibility and take it on. Yeah.
Love it. Is there something I haven't asked you that I should have asked?
The only thing I would think is, back to that question of how I stay positive, is like who specifically inspires me. And I said Dr. Jane Goodall.
Yes.
But I think it's closer to home. It's the community, people and family and friends. You know, even you starting your own business and you've gone off and done great strides, and seeing women do that and seeing my friends do that is really inspirational and drives me. Like my mother, with her conservation and her abundant scientific knowledge of the natural world, inspires me, and I really take advice from her. My father, for his business knowledge and knowledge of the mining industry and the responsibilities it has and the contribution it makes to Australia, also on the positive side. The people who inspire me are the ones who are closer to home. I think that's the question, is like, who inspires you to go on this journey? Yeah.
Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Yay! We're on a mission to find like-minded accountants from around Australia. If you are a purpose-led accountant, continue the conversation with us in our private Facebook group. Search for Accountants on Purpose, join us, and together we can change the world for good, for good.